Good morning and welcome to our webinar today, brought to you by our friends at Lintelligence. And the webinar is Selling Software as a Service Simplified. I'm your host today. My name is Chris Poupart. I'm the founder of Crossfire Copy, an IT marketing firm located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We're very pleased that you've joined us today. The SaaS market is exploding and it's creating huge opportunities for sellers and frankly some challenges as well. Today, we're going to discuss how sellers are adopting new skills and new approaches to be successful in the market. And to do that, I'm very pleased to introduce our guest expert, Peter Radizeski.
How you doing, Chris?
Good, Peter. Great to have you today. Just a quick bio on Peter. He's president of Radinfo Inc. It's a telecom strategy and marketing consultancy. He's authored 5 books, including Sellicom 2, Selling Cloud. He consults and trains channels all over North America. You can find his books on Amazon, his column in Channel Vision magazine, and his blog at channelplaybook.com. So just before we begin, please remember if you have any questions at any point during the session, click on the Q&A feature on your screen to enter your question, and we'll address it at the end. So with that, let's get started. Peter, perhaps we can begin by talking about why salespeople should care about selling software as a service.
Well, I mean, it's a very big realm. I mean, when you talk about software as a service, I mean, everything is software now. It's kind of like Mr. Andreessen said, software's eating the world. And if you look at stuff like Gartner canceling the premise UC Magic Quadrant, you'll see that premise is going away a little faster than most people thought. They thought it was going to take till 2020 or 2021 before box sales would get overtaken by cloud, and it's happened sooner. Some of that might have been because, you know, ShoreTel, Avaya, and Mitel had some reorgs and stuff that kind of affected buyers because buyers don't like an unstable market. Some of that's kind of pushed us right towards that. When you talk about VARs, their business model is kind of wrapped around a vendor or two, whether it's Dell, Microsoft, or Cisco, even HP. All of them have gone through tremendous changes in the last 4 years, all chasing an MRR business model. You know, Cisco really wants their VARs to sell WebEx Teams. Microsoft doesn't want them doing small business server or running an Exchange server anymore. They want them selling Office 365 or Teams or something. All of that is being pushed towards a SaaS model. And look at Dell. Dell owns VMware. So I mean, if anybody was championing the cloud, here's a hardware server business that owns the #1 virtualization container software company.
Understood. So Peter, if I'm a professional salesperson and perhaps I've spent a lot of my career selling more traditional premise-based solutions, is now a good time to start selling unified communications, contact center as a service, other cloud solutions? And if it is a good time, why is now the time?
Well, if you've ever been to an expo in the last 5 years, every single keynote has said you should have started selling cloud over the last 5 years. When you're talking about the SaaS market that's already at a $20 billion per quarter, I mean, with Salesforce probably driving a majority of that revenue, why wouldn't you want to get into that business? Survey after survey shows that most small businesses are already in the cloud. And depending how you define what a SaaS application is, you know, when you're talking about payroll or email or practice management software, most businesses, whether they know it or not, are already using the cloud to run their business. So why wouldn't somebody want to be in that market selling stuff?
True enough. So, you know, what I'm hearing is it's the market probably has more legs than traditional premise-based solution and more opportunities, more growth, all the things a typical salesperson wants to see as they look to, you know, make their numbers, grow their skill set, advance their careers.
Yeah, and one other thing people have to remember is the nicest thing about cloud is that Fortune 5000 level software is now available to any business in a subscription model. They didn't have that before. One of the things about contact center that we talk about when you're doing sales training for that is previously nobody could afford contact center software. I mean, to go buy Genesys or NICE was $100,000 plus and maintenance and all this other stuff. Now you can buy 5-10 seats at a time, turn every department into a contact center. I mean, that's the nice stuff about cloud.
Understood. Yeah. And so it's really, it's accessible at all ends of the market to all customers. And I guess all different types of cloud solutions, right from what, 50 seats and up? Is that fair, or even lower than that?
Even lower than that. I mean, I have clients that, are doing a lot of 5 seats. Everybody's like, oh, 5 seats. Hey, you know what? 5 seats every week. Eventually, at the end of the year, you have pretty good business. It's one of the things that I try to tell a lot of the VARs is like, if they concentrate on just one cloud sale a month, don't give up your whole business model, but sell one cloud sale a month. End of the year, you have 12 deals. You'll start to really see the effect, and you can, without having disrupted your business model. It doesn't have to be 10,000 seats at a time.
And I guess from a sales perspective too, it's cumulative. So it's not like a sales event. Client pretty much goes to sleep with that particular solution for 18 to 36 months, and you sell it again. It's reoccurring revenue that you can build on, and it's almost like the insurance business, I guess, from a salesperson's perspective, if I could use
It
that
is.
analogy.
It is a little bit. And the nice thing for the client is no more maintenance, no more patching, no more upgrades. I mean, that's all handled in the background where they don't have to, they only see the end result. They're not disrupted by it. They're not calling a guy in saying, hey, nobody's touched my PBX, or, nobody's touched my server in forever. I really need it patched.
Right.
Also, no big bill for the patching either, which used to be a little bit of a headache for a small business. Like, hey, you haven't touched your small business server in 2 years, and we got to catch up, and that's going to be 4 hours.
So more transparent, predictable costs from a client perspective.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Now perhaps we can take a step back, because I know that you have done a lot of work in the unified communications space. And a lot of what we're seeing is activity as we move from prem to cloud. A lot of that activity is taking place in unified communication space. So maybe we could just step back a little bit and kind of define UC for purposes of our discussion.
Sure. So I will apologize to the audience ahead of time that I am UC bent, because I've spent, since 2003, I've been in that space. So most of my examples for cloud, even though it applies to everything across the board, is pretty much unified communications based. And UC really has become an umbrella for a whole bunch of functions that some fell in the PBX space, some did not. So, voice and telephony certainly did. It also includes conferencing, whether that's audio, web, or video. Messaging, whether it's IM, chat, SMS. There are even UC applications that take in, WhatsApp and other functions like Slack or HipChat. It involves presence, which is actually one of the cool things, and kind of replaces, call park. Knowing who's on a phone, who's out of the office, who's available, makes for a lot less voicemail. And then obviously clients, because the nice thing about the cloud is everything can be done remotely, whether it's on a smartphone, a desktop, a tablet. And the last thing is, we used to call it SebP, and it's now being called API. The nice thing about cloud stuff is you can attach it to pull data from other places, whether it's as simple as click to call out of your address book, or you want to attach it to Salesforce so that your communications are being logged inside the file for that client.
So it's much easier to integrate your existing customer database or customer information into cloud-based unified communications, as opposed to older traditional premises systems?
Sure. Depending on the platform, although most of them do have some kind of API, what the API actually allows is, sometimes with a little bit of professional services help, is you to pull data in and out of other databases, which if you go back early on in contact center world, we all wanted one call resolution. And the hard part about that one call resolution was it required a lot of information that was in data silos that couldn't be touched. And we're in a point now, the databases are all sitting on AWS, and it's not siloed anymore. So you're able to grab data from what used to be a data silo, like CRM over here, and maybe your customer database over here, maybe billing over here, maybe procurement, so that all of that data flows into one place so that you can help the customer. Because ultimately, that's what we're doing. And we're not selling UC because it's pretty. We're selling it because we want to improve customer service.
Right, and help transform their business. So I guess, and as a Canadian, I got to appreciate the hockey slide, but
especially right now, huh?
Well, yeah, at least for another few days, we can appreciate hockey in Toronto. But I guess the message here is, as a salesperson, you want to be forward-looking, not only for yourself, but really for your customers. And it really reflects the type of applications, the type of business that customers want to do, is why you really need to make that shift, I guess, away from more traditional premises based to cloud. Is that?
If you believe that everybody's going to cloud, and that's the future of business, there's a cartoonist, Gaping Void, his name is Hugh McLeod. He says the art of business is really helping your customers get to where they need to be faster. And most people believe cloud is going to be the ultimate winner over premise. Not everybody believes that. If you have that worldview, that's great. I can't convince you otherwise. But maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there were a lot of businesses that saw this as an opportunity to get out of being a landlord. They were like, oh, we can get rid of all offices and we can push people home. And we do have a swing towards freelancers, where a lot of companies have 1099 employees who aren't sitting in a cube in a building they own. And you see more and more of that, not less and less than that. Mary Meeker puts out an internet report every year, and last year it was 45% are 1099. That's almost half. We have a flux going on in where workers are and what workers do, and that affects like how you communicate, because communication isn't just with customers, it's with employees, contractors, and vendors. And if everybody's sitting very far away and you want to collaborate with them, software kind of helps with that. And we're kind of sitting at a point where, we're at the 11-year anniversary of the iPhone. So a lot of people are really used to a very unique computer in their pocket that does an awful lot of things. And meanwhile, they still have a crappy old desk phone that doesn't really do anything. I'm going to make one point about the desk phone. This also was probably 5 or 6 years ago, before Astra got bought by Mitel and stuff. A number of the handset companies realized that that was a computer sitting on their desk and started a marketplace for the handset because it had a screen and it was a computer, and they were able to push stuff to it, like CNN. So on your phone, you could be watching CNN while you're doing work on your computer. And there was other stuff they were pushing to it. That didn't really take off, probably because it was a very small screen, and we realized that workers were going to have 2 screens and they could just jam it in the corner or whatever. But it's just to let you know that we are sitting on almost every device is now a computer because the chips have gotten so small and cheap.
So Peter, for the younger members of our audience, do we have to explain what that circular thing with the numbers is in the middle of the phone?
Yeah, I guess we should. That's an old dial tone POTS phone. We used to have to like ring around and wait and ring around before push buttons came along.
Yeah, you're taking me back to my years at the start of my career in Bell Canada, which is really too far to revisit. So we'll leave it for another day. So great point about the iPhone, and really that's probably what we're hearing from customers as well. Huh?
It is, and I'm not an iPhone guy. I'm an Android guy, but you can appreciate the fact that Apple did change the customer experience interacting with a device like that. I mean, it became, look, Kodak didn't know that they were going to get replaced by a phone either. Who would have thought everybody was going to have a camera in their hand at all times, 24/7? Or you're able to get almost any piece of information you want on a device that sits in your pocket. You don't need to know anything anymore. You can look everything up. And then you look at the other thing and you're like, that thing didn't do anything except dial numbers. It's a wild change. I mean, if you've lived through it, it's been a very slow process, obviously, but it's a wild change if you think about it.
And then we have a whole, generation of the workforce who's never experienced work any other way or interacting any other way. So there's clearly no going back.
It's kind of like CDs and floppies, right? We used to get our software mailed to us, and then we would spend an awful lot of time putting one floppy after another into the thing. They don't know what that's like because they don't even have a desktop. If anything, most of them are probably still working off a tablet, and if they're really sophisticated, it's an Apple MacBook, which has no inputs like that. But if you think about that there are no inputs. There's no floppy, there's no CD, there's no DVD drive anymore. Where is everything sitting? It's sitting in the cloud, everything. There are iTunes, there are movies, there are pictures, every app, all the data is sitting in the cloud. So how would you not think that that's where everything is going if your whole entire daily life is sitting there?
True enough.
So I think we kind of already made the point about the customer, but one of the things when you're selling it to be thinking about is, does your prospect even realize how cloud enabled they already are? And do they realize all the stuff they could possibly do to change the experience with the customer in a way that they didn't have access to 5 years ago? That's really what, as the salesperson, that's what we need to be explaining to the customer, educating them that there is a world available that can change their customer experience.
I think that's a great point because, obviously most customers as individuals use a lot of newer technology. They have smartphones, but their business where they work may still be locked into different legacy technology. So part of the role for a salesperson is to educate the client about what's possible, what other leaders in their industry are doing, how they can transform their business, how they can align the technology to some of their business priorities and so forth.
one of the things that a really good salesperson does is explain what best practices in the industry look like.
So I guess that probably takes us to the next portion of our discussion, which is maybe I've sold a certain way to a certain client base for years, and I've been very successful. And now I realize that I need to transform myself a little bit, put some new tools in my toolkit, start to sell cloud. What's different about selling SaaS as opposed to selling traditional legacy technology?
There's a couple of things. One, if you look at the way a majority of the channel sells UCaaS, they sell it the same way they've sold everything else. It's a replacement service. So they're like, oh, you have a PBX, I'll give you something similar. How many seats you need? That's a great way to give the client the exact same experience for more money. But that's really not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be changing the way they do business. I mean, if they want to use cloud to enable a better customer experience and a better employee experience, then they're going to have to change. And selling change is really, really, really hard. One, because nobody likes change. Not us, not the buyer. As a matter of fact, I'm going to digress for a second. I had a client who was an MSP who got into VDI really early, and he had sold 10 clients in a year on virtual desktop. And by the end of the next year, they were all back on desktop because there were employees that just couldn't accept doing business that way. They wanted their own desktop experience. They wanted to be able to download their own stuff. And you can't really do that on VDI because VDI kind of locks it all down. I've had UC clients who had the same thing. Mary's used to call Park and paging, and we took that away and gave it to her a different way, and she just is ineffective at her job, and then they go backwards. You have to be upfront about saying we're going to sell change. Otherwise, you're really just selling the replacement piece, and that's not always a very effective way of selling this stuff. The best example I can give is, and there probably are many people that have no idea what I'm talking about next, but one of the early CRMs I ever used was ACT, and it sat on a floppy disk on my computer. Those were my customers and my information. And when I left, I took it on my floppy drive and left the company. The company had no way to keep that data because back then computers weren't networked, there was no file server, there was no cloud to back it up in. It was backed up on a floppy drive. See how different Salesforce is than that? And that's the example of taking software that sat on a desktop and then what cloud software looks like and how different it is. Another example would probably be HubSpot. We didn't even have marketing automation software when I was in business. I mean, I've been in this business 20 years. It's a new thing. But before that, you got a mailing list, you printed stuff out, you mailed it out, and that was it. Today, you're able to pull all this data into HubSpot, whether you're connected to MailChimp or somewhere else, your CRM, whether it's Zoho or Salesforce, whatever, all connects in and allows you to market like crazy in very little time. That's cloud. It's building scale. It's managing services. It's obsolescence free. You can access it from anywhere, whether you're at work or you're at home. It's a lot of flexibility. This is what you need to be selling, not well, we can replace that for this, because it doesn't always work well.
So Peter, one thing that I saw on that slide that drew my eye immediately was right in the middle where we talk about money, because selling cloud is a completely different financial discussion than selling legacy solution or prem-based solutions. That's because true. Of the CapEx versus OpEx discussion.
Right. So it's not a capital expense anymore. It's now an operating ongoing expense, which right there is your worldview, whether you believe everything should be CapEx or everything should be OpEx. Good to find that early so you can disqualify prospects on what you're trying to sell them. But the difference is, like years ago, you either bought the server or you bought the PBX and you owned it. And that's a capital expense. Yes, there was ongoing maintenance for all that stuff, which fell into OpEx, but a majority of the purchase was CapEx, and you owned it. The way cloud works is ongoing monthly recurring revenue, and that's operating expense. And it depends which bucket of the finances the CFO wants to be in.
Right. Thank you.
But I'll give you another example of like the big shift. I don't know how many people on this phone remember a BlackBerry. All that thing really did was text and make phone calls. You really couldn't surf the web on it. You could do email. And the transition to what we have today is huge, and it happened in less than 10 years. A lot of the other stuff we're talking about has taken a lot longer, more like 20, to move servers out of the closet, off-prem. So this isn't going to happen overnight. That's the other reason why I say there's no reason to disrupt your entire business model. Sell one deal at a time. We're still in early stages here. And there are still people that are really happy with their BlackBerry that don't want to move off that BlackBerry. And I mean that in a symbolic way, not in an actual way, because I don't think anybody still has a BlackBerry. But when you're selling, you have to decide if somebody is really happy with the BlackBerry or they really, really want to buy the new iPhone. And the sooner you figure that out, the sooner you can move forward or backward on a discussion, if that makes sense.
And I think you make an excellent point, and I'm kind of chuckling to myself because you and I both know people that you had to pry that BlackBerry from their hands.
I was one of those people.
I have one in my drawer here and another old one upstairs. So I think I went through 3 generations, and it was a very difficult transition to move to a smartphone. You hated the keyboard. You lost some productivity in the very short term. But as you started to get used to the new interface and then start to layer on applications, you kind of took your productivity to a whole new level fairly quickly.
You make an excellent point, but go back and repeat what you said about there is a period of adjustment.
Absolutely.
And as salespeople, one of the things we have to manage is expectations of our clients. And so you have to manage them through that uncomfortable change. Say, hey, look, just like going from the BlackBerry to iPhone, you're going to be uncomfortable for a little while. But once you learn the new way, it's going to be a lot better for everybody.
And, you see that in, my background is in enterprise, but you see a lot of enterprise vendors really building up their teams that help customers. And their only job is to help customers adopt the tech and use the technology they've bought. And that's to your point. I mean, you need to get customers over the hump where they're moving from the old to the new and actually utilizing all the features and functionality that they purchased in order to get them productive and really get them on board with the new.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I did a panel on user adaptability at IT Expo, and I was shocked by the number of people in the room that were looking for an answer on how to, when you sell 1,000 seats of something, how do you actually get the people to actually use it, or to use more than just, like for UCaaS, they're just using it for a phone. User adoption is huge. Some of it has to do with training and retraining, and some of it has to do with best practices, showing them what is capable and what is possible and how to do it. And again, it goes over your selling change, and somebody has to be there to march that change along.
It's so true. You can't really underestimate the resistance to that change in some cases.
Yeah, it's kind of like the way we sell stuff. When you think about telco, and this goes all the way back to Sprint's pin drop in the 1992, long distance was all about, they went from $1 to a nickel in like 5 years. It was all, I'll give you the same exact experience for less money. And telco has been that way since the 90s. Celix came along and did the exact same thing. Our industry has gone from T1 to SDSL to Ethernet to whatever, and it's whatever pipe fits into your box that's cheaper than the last pipe. And maybe it's faster and maybe it's not. Then you come along and you got to try to sell cloud. That's closer to selling managed IT than it is to selling telco. Where does the business intend to go? What is it you want to do? That requires an awful lot of discovery. That requires a discussion that isn't, oh, you have 10 megs from cable now, I can sell you 100 megs from Bell Canada for less. And not for nothing, that gets old really quick as a day-to-day discussion. Just we already touched on the OpEx and the CapEx, but the other is probably the stakeholder. If you're going to sell change, you better have a stakeholder, somebody that's going to help push that user adoption, that's going to push the change, that's going to be tied probably to the outcome. Because one of the things about SaaS is it is a software project. Doesn't matter if that's contact center, UCaaS, CRM, APIs, chatbots, doesn't really matter. That is a software project. And historically, 70% of them do not have a positive outcome throughout the world. If you think about how many projects we've been doing since the 60s in software, I remember working on a DB2 database project where they were going to move to Oracle and couldn't. Sometimes you run into walls. I've had clients that have tried to take AS400 applications and shove them in the cloud, and you can't do that. The cloud is basically Intel-based, and AS400 is RISC CPU-based. That's incompatibility times 100. But these are some of the reasons you have failures. But one reason you have failures, you don't have a stakeholder who has the outcome clearly as a bonusable performance metric, which can help the outcome get met, especially if he's not going to get bonused if he doesn't meet it.
You're making another great point here is that as you sell cloud, you'll find that you're dealing with people that you haven't dealt with before in some of these accounts. In some of the larger accounts, some of the smaller accounts, people wear many hats. It's not necessarily the case, but in some larger accounts where they have an IT lead or a director of IT or a director of telecom, suddenly you may find yourself talking to the CFO or the VP of sales, or someone else who traditionally haven't
VP
sold to, and VP marketing, and they speak a different language. They have different careabouts. To your point, they're bonus different ways, and they want different outcomes from the business. And the other interesting thing is a lot of them hold the budget that IT used to hold. So as salespeople, you have to put those tools in your toolkit to be able to have those discussions with those customers.
Absolutely. And when you think about the different business lines and you think about the wide world of software that's available, take the CFO, who probably has responsibility for AR and AP, right? Accounting, receivables, and payables. He may have 12 people down there, and he was never able to get contact center for those folks. And now he can buy contact center, put an IVR on, and be doing a much more efficient job than he was doing before. It could be right now with CPaaS 2.0 and the chatbots. I mean, you're able to pull down and do a varying amount of customer service automated. And that could be a department that does that, not the entire enterprise. So yeah, it could be a line of business buyer that wants this. One, makes it more difficult for a sales guy who's used to talking to IT people. On the other hand, your list of buyers have gone up immensely, but they may be smaller sales. It may just be a department, not the entire enterprise.
And strictly from a sales perspective too, it opens up opportunities in accounts that maybe you've been unsuccessful in the past. Maybe you've worked with an account and for whatever reason you just didn't click with the IT decision maker. Suddenly, you have an opportunity to go to other people in that same account and position different solutions and maybe do some business where you haven't done business in the past.
And one thing I will say, one of the list of benefits is speed of deployment. If they're not the IT department, talking about what the deployment looks like of the software is very helpful. There is a fear of change. There is a ton of other types of fear that they have because, one, they're not the IT department. They're just looking for an outcome. The more you can put them at ease and let them know, hey, we've got this. You're not the first that have ever bought this. We roll it out just this way. There's a PM involved. We have a schedule for this. It's going to roll out nice and easy. Or, we have an agile department that handles how we roll stuff out. Or talking about the deployment can put them at ease. And I find that for the most part, salespeople don't ever talk post-ink, and post-ink is what scares most people.
I mean, even your ability to do a trial for a client with cloud versus a prem solution is radically different.
Yeah, just to make it easier. So if you think pre-cloud, I remember Oracle 8i, which was going to be their revolutionary product, and they sent everybody CDs of this. And I remember having that CD on my desk until I quit that job. And I'm like, wow, how many people never, ever, ever deployed it? And they have no way of knowing. But today you do know if they've trialed it or not, because you're going to get pinged in the portal or something. You'll know when there's activity. So you also know where they are in the trial, which makes the sale a little easier than, hey, we sent you this software, download it whenever you want and play with it. It's a little better today because of metrics. Chris, this is a book you like. The thing I could take out of it the most is to stick with business outcomes. I don't know what you took out of this book.
Yeah, the reason I picked up this book, well, it was actually required reading when I was at Cisco about 4 years ago. But what's really fascinating about this book from a salesperson perspective is it talks about how the traditional IT selling model was kind of developed by NCR in the late 1800s, and it never really changed up until about 6 or 7 years ago. And now clients are, it talks about how you move, cloud moves the risk from the client, who in the past had to buy a whole bunch of stuff and spend a whole lot of money and then make it work, to now that risk is shared with vendors, and clients can sort of consume a little bit at a time and flex up and flex down. And it just gives a really good understanding from a client perspective of what they're looking for from a vendor relationship today, and the impact that cloud has had on that dynamic. So I thought it was just worth throwing it in. If people like to read, this is book's a few years old. You could probably pick it up at a bit of a discount now, but it's worth having a look at if you're a reader.
I think the largest thing to look at is its business outcomes. When you're selling managed IT, it is about the business outcome. You're trying to get people to stop thinking break, fix, and let's get ahead of the problem.
I was going to say, it's a great point. I mean, clients today, that's what all they want to talk about is the business outcome, really. And they're less and less interested in the underlying technology or the infrastructure that they have to build to support that technology.
You're a technology provider. Your job is to take the technology out of their way. And as a general rule, we don't do that, but that's the ultimate goal.
So, and I love this slide, and it's so true. But a lot of the good advice I've ever gotten is some of it is free. But again, we won't go there. But so let's talk a little bit about, if we're sort of coaching or recommending to salespeople to say, I want to accelerate my ability to sell cloud. What should I focus on? What's going to make me the most successful? I mean, what would you tell them?
Well, we touched on the executive sponsor already, but it is kind of pretty important. It's like, who's the business leader? Whose bonus is tied to the outcome? That's going to be your influencer inside, and you kind of need one for a cloud project. The other is, as much as we always want to talk about business value, I learned during a really big project that it's actually where I learned that you had to figure out who was getting bonused for what, because they all have a personal and emotional side to whether or not they're going to buy something. The thing about B2B selling is they're using other people's money, which everybody thinks they'll do in a logical way, but we don't do anything logical as humans. Almost all of it is we make a decision and then we rationalize it internally. So don't forget to look at the fact that it will be an emotional sale. Not as much as we think, but it's not purely a logical sale. Like, here's the TCO, here's the ROI, you're ready to roll. There's going to be other factors. In smaller businesses, that factor may be, I'm not picking on women by saying Mary, but it's going to be the assistant to the CEO. If she's adverse to change, then this project is never going to go very far. And finding out where the hurdles are internally, and they're all going to be emotional hurdles, none of them are going to be business hurdles, will help you in the sales process, because you'll know whether or not it's going to go forward or not. I know in my case, I only get paid when the customer is paying the bill. So I don't want it stalled along the way. Otherwise, I've wasted a lot of time. The other is, you kind of got to be, go ahead.
I was going to say, and it's so true, but, and as a salesperson, it takes a lot of subtlety kind of, and time with the customer to tease those out, because you can't really ask a customer, so what's driving your personal decision, or tell me how you're bonused. I mean, but you kind of have to look for the clues and sift around and get a sense by what they tell you of where their priorities lie, which, to your point, is not always where you think they are.
Well, I mean, it's not unreasonable to ask them what the top 3 business priorities are for 2019 for the business, for you, without really saying, hey, where does your bonus lie? But he's going to tell you in those 3 priorities, at least one of those 3 is where he's getting bonused. I can tell you that.
Exactly. It's like help me help you is
kind of, yeah.
It's almost like the Jerry Maguire discussion, but a little bit. But
show me the money. Yeah. So the other is, you got to be Sherlock Holmes. You got to do a lot of discovery. You should have really good questions to ask. And I can tell you, as a sales guy, you can get the most attention by asking a question that they've never heard before. And a lot of people have not heard, how cloud enabled are you? A lot of people have not heard questions about what software is so mission critical that if it didn't work, your business would close. Because you don't think about that until you're asked it, and then when you think about it, it's probably more than one. But if you want to go to healthcare for a minute, whether it's a dentist or a doctor, most of them have practice management software that runs everything. It runs the scheduling, it runs the billing, it's where the X-rays lie, it's their customer database. Without that, they're dead in the water.
No, and even just you'd be surprised at how many salespeople don't do a little basic research before seeing a customer. Spend some time on the customer's website, try to get a high-level understanding of the drivers in the industry. I mean, these are all things that you can do that are going to kind of differentiate you when you get in front of that customer, as well as having specific questions around their environment, cloud, like you mentioned, that really kind of make you stand out.
Sure. And the other thing, if you're going to do research, is if you know it's a bank, then you've sold to 20 banks, find out what those 20 banks already buy from you.
Yeah.
So you can go in and say, look, in my experience, and we have 20 banking customers that are a lot like you, they bought all this stuff. And we can give you one reference account, and you're marching along like a song, because they all want to do what everybody else is doing in the industry.
Yeah, you make a great point about lighthouse accounts. If you have, if you have a good customer and they've had a successful implementation, and they're open to discussing that success with other customers, treat that particular customer like gold, because they'll really help you develop your business with other clients.
The other is upsell. We talk about cloud contact center. That's CCaaS, is cloud contact center as a service, has big pull through. And the reason it has pull through is because, one, they're going to need an awful lot of bandwidth. Two, they're probably going to buy UCaaS from the same person. And the reason that little "do you want fries with that" thing is there is never forget add-ons. So often I see quotes and proposals that just one thing, and there's never and it's never, hey, this is a possibility, this is a possibility, and by the way, our best clients buy A, B, and C when they buy that. Amazon does a fantastic job of that, but not many other companies copy that.
So we've talked about the why. Now let's talk about some of the things that may present challenges to salespeople as they move into the cloud world.
One of my favorite sales trainers is Zig Ziglar, who is no longer with us. But there's always 5 obstacles to a sale, and your job as a sales guy is to find out which one of those 5 it is. No need, no money, no hurry, no desire, no trust. In cloud, most often it's no trust. Everybody really wants better, faster, and cheaper, but we all know that we only sell 2 of those 3 at any given time. And the sooner I have a philosophy in sales of disqualifying as soon as possible. Because moving to cloud is kind of a worldview kind of thing. I want to know if they're kicking tires or they actually have a worldview where their business will be better if they move to the cloud. And if they don't, then I want to know that as soon as possible so I can move on to somebody else and not waste my time. And I know that seems an anthem to most people, but I spend a lot of time selling through the channel, and a lot of channel partners are even anti-cloud. They still think that having the server owned by the customer or the PBX owned by the customer is better for the customer in a TCO kind of world. If that's the case, that's fine. I can't convince you of otherwise, and I have no time in my day to do that. So I would like to move on to the next customer who does want to go to the cloud, because there are plenty of them, because in the chasm world, we are just about at the middle, so there are a lot of people that want to jump on the bandwagon. The other is that a lot of people, there was just a survey that came out last year that people still think the cloud has something to do with weather. So as shocking as that is, you're going to have to be able to do some explanation of cloud. And to give you another aside, I've had an awful lot of financial people, whether they're in PE firms or VC firms or work for banks, that still don't realize that cloud is just that somebody else is running the servers in a much better way than you could run them yourself. So there's still co-location, there's still data centers, there's still actual hardware. This stuff isn't just sitting in the ether somewhere. And you may have to educate your client on that. And I'm not saying you have to get very, very technical, but you do have to kind of explain it a little bit. The other is that no one size fits all. As we were talking about, like, it might be line of business, it might be marketing that's buying the software from you, it might be the IT department, or it might be somebody else. You're going to have to tailor your sales approach to who you're talking to. If you're talking to an IT guy, you're probably used to that. If you're not talking to an IT guy, it's going to be you're probably going to have to listen a lot more intently, I guess.
Yeah, just a quick one on that. There's a certain, you'll also find that there are times when you are coaching your existing IT contact in terms of how to speak to his internal stakeholders about business, because sometimes they don't know how to make that leap from the technology to the business when discussing cloud. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic too. You end up coaching some of your older contacts.
Yep. Also, or your IT contacts may get stuck having to support a project that some other department is doing, and you don't want it to fail. So you've got to figure out how to coach your IT contacts into accepting the responsibility.
There's that too.
And that's a sales job too. This truly is consultative selling, and the better questions you ask, the better off you'll be. And writing them down and having them on a pad ahead of time certainly helps it, so you won't forget them. But the more you ask, the more you'll know, and the more you know, the more you'll find a hot button, and the more you find the hot button, you keep pressing it to make the sale. when I got into this space in 2003, I did a lot of work with BroadSoft powered VoIP companies, and they all thought it was going to be all or nothing. But when I did go to market for BroadSoft, one of the things I helped them with was add-on selling. Okay, you're happy with your premise PBX? That's fine. Maybe you need services layered on top of that, which we can easily do. We can sell them better voicemail if that broke, or an IVR or ACD. We can add contact center functionality. You can add mobility, add find me, follow me. There's plenty of functionality that you can add on top of it they don't already have, so you can get a toehold in it. Because one of the things about, especially UCaaS, it has a sales trigger, and that sales trigger more than 60% of the time is the PBX has to die. So if you already have a foot in the door selling them something, when it does die, you're right there. The other is for a lot of cloud sales, it's a thing called salience. And that means that you want to be top of mind when they actually decide to pull the trigger. When they wake up one day and realize that, hey, we can't find anybody to fix our hardware, which has happened more and more in the last 5 years than ever before. And you want to be top of mind.
I was going to say, and many vendors actually, many hardware vendors, that's part of their strategy, is they make support for their hardware and their solution more and more expensive and eventually get rid of it completely as part of their strategy to make you upgrade. So your point's right on.
Also to prop up profits, let's be real. But the other, like I said earlier, let them realize that they are using the cloud. Ask them what software runs their business, what they're using, and they'll see that they're deeper in the cloud than they think, which will make it a little easier for you. The other is, we kind of did touch on, do your homework. The other is, like, one piece of homework you can do is actually call the phone number and see what the IVR is like. Can you ever talk to a human being? And on the other end of it is, if you can find out what workflow looks like internally, that'll help. And not just selling UCaaS, selling almost anything. If you know what departments they rely on most, or what departments are going through the most digital transformation right now, that'll help you sell more to those departments. I already talked about the sales triggers, but for UCaaS, but for almost everything, there's a sales trigger. Even managed IT, if you're trying to get away from the break fix model, there is going to be a point where they are going to look at it and be like, forget it, it's not worth doing this, because you do have people. One thing that most businesses don't realize is how much downtime costs them. There's lots of surveys and stuff that come out about data breaches and what downtime is, but if you sit in a room with them and like, all right, if the internet goes down or that breaks, how much is that costing you? Because like if a desktop goes out, that person's not doing any work for what, 8-10 hours? Because by the time you put a new desktop there, patch all the OS, download all the software, move everything over onto the computer, that's a 10-hour, 12-hour job, way more than what the cost of that PC is. As a salesperson, showing them that, it gets very concrete. If they had virtual desktop, everything takes a lot less time.
Now, I love this one because it's a great point, and you do get customers that just kind of want to say, so what would it cost me? What can you just give me a quote? And I know you have strong feelings on this one, so I'm gonna let you speak to it.
Well, this is one of my favorite business consultants. That's Tom Peters, and he never said you're not a quote machine, but I did use him for this. The best answer for this is, I need information to give you an intelligent quote, and then you go into discovery, and you'll end up with a lot of data. And you'll also, during that questioning, if he doesn't want to answer a lot of the questions, then you can't give him an intelligent quote, in which case he doesn't really want one, in which case you've disqualified. But it also goes back to disqualify as much as possible. Let's not forget that a lot of procurement people need 3 quotes, and they've already picked out who the vendor is. They just need 2 other people. I don't like being used like that. It's not my favorite way to spend my day.
Well, and it's not productive, and it's hard to make your number if 2 out of 3 quotes you're putting out in the street are just for show.
Yep.
So when customers, how do customers know when it's time to look at a new communication system? I mean, what are sort of their drivers to invest in one?
Well, one thing is to remember that we're not really selling them a new comm system. We are selling them time, and not time as in we're giving them 9 hours back. It doesn't work that way. You're saving them little bits of time. If you think about something as simple as like click to call, and last year I did a consulting thing, 2,600 offices. and they were going to move to Ring Central mainly because of click to call. They want to click the call and they want to call logs. And I was like, click the call. He's like, yeah, I need my salespeople dialing all day. And I understand that they save 3 seconds per dial if it's click to call as opposed to them looking something up and then punching the numbers. And he literally was looking at a business case based on 3 seconds per action, which goes right to workers' productivity. And the other is like, I know everybody talks about mobile, remote, virtual workers. That's not a majority of the workforce. It's something less than 40%. But since salespeople fall into that, they're usually the ones driving the most revenue. So you want to make them as productive as possible. The other is there's been an awful lot of consolidation and M&A going on in America in the last 5 years. Putting them all on one communication system that they don't have to bother running anymore is a great idea. The other reason you might want to sell it is because it's just one more revenue stream. And if you're not going to sell it to them, somebody else is, and they might also sell them stuff that you sell. And eventually you're not in that account anymore.
You know, this might be the most important point, the most important slide in some ways for salespeople who are sort of kind of a little rooted in the past or very successful in terms of what they're doing today is your customer is going to change whether you're the catalyst or not. And if other people kind of capture their mind share and their confidence in the ability to make that change, it puts you in a not the best position as a salesperson. So that's why you need to lead the change. Yeah.
And like I say, we're a little past the chasm here. We're in the early majority for cloud. So there are plenty of people that want in. Talk to the ones that want in. All this stuff is in the mainstream now. And there's a study that says that for SMBs, when they buy their first and second cloud service, they'll do it on their own. But by the time they hit the third one, they want help. And most of them are on beyond, you think of cloud backup and Office 365 and payroll and CRM and stuff. Most of them are past 3, so they want help, and that can be you, especially if you can manage all of that for them. And I want to appreciate you all for listening. This has been a pretty fun webinar, actually.
So Peter, I think we have a couple of questions from the audience, and we have a few minutes. We can maybe take them.
Sure.
And this one is my favorite, so I got to ask it first. So it looks like the individual has had a lot of success selling prem-based solutions, and they killed their number. And I have great clients. I'm doing really well. Why don't I just keep selling what I'm selling? And I think we covered some of it, but I think it's worth reinforcing that one day the bottom could just kind of, things could taper off, or no matter how successful you are selling legacy solutions.
It's why I tell people they should try to sell one cloud deal a month and not change everything they're doing, just that one. One reason you'll have a new challenge every month, you won't be nearly as bored. And secondly, you'll start building up your cloud base, which surprisingly you may need sooner than you think. Also, when you look at a lot of businesses that I deal with, the lesson that has been learned since the CBeyond debacle, Dell knows this, that's why they went private. Avaya knows this, Mitel knows this, ShoreTel knows this. Digital transformation to go from selling boxes to selling cloud is extremely difficult and takes a very long time. You can either wipe everybody off and then just hire people that aren't stuck in the old world, and that may happen at a few places, and that may happen to you because you haven't moved with the times. It's just another reason to, give it a go.
I think you're 100% right on that. One final question, if we could. This is about other cloud solutions that, what other cloud solutions that I might find myself selling that are complementary to UCaaS and contact center as a service. And the example in the question is SD-WAN. So are there other services I should be putting in my toolkit that kind of bring the whole thing together?
I think add-ons certainly help. If you're selling managed IT, the process for selling cloud is similar, just the product set changes a little bit. If you are selling UCaaS, contact center is a way to increase the ARPU because UCaaS is kind of have a downward price pressure right now, and contact center does not. Plus, the functionality of cloud contact center lets you have a deeper discussion with your customer. And when you talk about SD-WAN, that's an uptime discussion when they realize that they're so stuck in cloud that they realize that uptime is hugely important, you can add that stuff on. It's a wide breadth. I mean, cybersecurity is really big with all the vendors right now. Trying to pick one, though, I think would be a little tough, because who's doing it right and who's doing it wrong, I have no idea. We are in a shifting world for MSPs and VARs on what can be sold. IoT, connected everything. I mean, we are at the cusp of an unlimited world of what you can sell, I think.
And I think, to your point, for salespeople, the choice of whether they do it or don't do it is theirs. But, as Yoda says, there is no try.
The whole idea is to get deeper into the business and to help them go where they want to go. That may require some education on the part of the salesperson, and you're going to be uncomfortable for a while. But you were uncomfortable when you first started 20 years ago, and you lived through it without dying. So doing it one more time isn't going to hurt you too much. But also, I think the possibility right now of what can be sold and what can be done, we've only touched on. Between robotics and AI and IoT, and I know those are huge umbrella things that everybody's sick of hearing, but when you look at specific case studies of what's being done under those umbrellas, I think smaller businesses will be impacted greatly by that stuff, because they're going to be able to take the power of the cloud and compete with enterprises a lot better than enterprises are going to be able to take the power of cloud and compete with them.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's a great equalizer. So, Peter, I think that just about wraps up our session for today. I'd like to thank you very much for your excellent insights into selling SaaS. I'd also like to thank Lantelligence for hosting today's webinar, and Galina and Yana from the Lantelligence team for making it all happen. For those of you who joined us today, thank you. And you'll receive an email with a link to recording of the webinar. And as always, we value your feedback. And if you have ideas on how we can do these better in the future, we're all ears for that. So have a great day, everyone, and a great weekend.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.